Welcome, everyone. Today we're diving into some intense predictions about Europe and the economic and political strategies playing out on the continent.
Absolutely. What's striking to me is the claim that Europe might even need war as a distraction. Yep, that's a bold assertion.
Right, right. So the discussion kicks off with the idea that Europe is using conflict as a sort of smokescreen to divert attention from internal issues.
And not only that, there's also the suggestion that France might be on the verge of needing an IMF bailout, which is a huge statement about its economic vulnerabilities.
Exactly. Now, what really grabs my attention is the connection made between traditional state economics and what they call Ponzi economics. It's argued that the West, much like the collapse of communism, is teetering on the
Yeah,
brink.
right. It's fascinating, yet unsettling. And the discussion digs into Ukraine, a central piece in the narrative, where Europe's rearmament and political maneuvers are seen as pushing the region towards heightened tension.
And it's like the idea is that Ukraine remains a hot topic, but it's also a strategic tool in distracting from underlying domestic problems.
Yep. I mean, consider this. If you have a nation in crisis, like France potentially needing financial rescue, then using a conflict abroad as a diversion could be almost operatic in a political sense.
Yeah, it's like a deliberate redirection of public focus. The argument goes that by keeping the population riveted on external threats, Ukraine and potential double downs on Russia, the internal economic shortcomings get less scrutiny.
But don't you think that's a bit oversimplifying the whole picture? I mean, while that theory has some merit, it also skirts around how multifaceted these crises are.
True, true. There's nuance here. The discussion concedes that incompetent Western leadership might further compound the issue. They argue that leadership has been using these conflicts as maneuvers for political gain.
Right. And there's also talk about false flags, which is perennial in this kind of debate. The idea that events are staged to push specific agendas really colors the conversation.
Yeah, exactly. It's like imagine setting up a stage where every act is carefully choreographed. The speakers in the discussion even hint at the fact that these conflicts might be engineered or at least exploited for ulterior motives, almost like a Cold War game with modern tools.
Interesting analogy. And what about the notion that US stablecoins could become war bonds? That's a fascinating intersection between finance and warfare.
Right, it's like you have this move to transform currency into a sort of collateral for military expenditure. Basically, the argument is that when traditional monetary systems falter, these crypto assets could essentially back the financing of war.
Yep, that sounds both innovative and, well, kind of terrifying if you think about the potential for economic destabilization on a global scale.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you factor in predictions that lean towards a full blown collapse of the West, the stakes are enormous. The notion is that the same flawed economics that underpinned past collapses could and will lead to a similar fate here.
I'm a bit skeptical though. I mean, isn't it a leap to say that current economic behaviors equate directly with a collapse? There are so many variables at play.
Sure, it does require a leap of faith, or at least a belief in a very deterministic economic model. But the narrative here is consistent. Incompetent leadership, persistent conflicts, and unsustainable finance practices all converge to forecast a meltdown.
Yep, I see that. And speaking of leadership, there's a recurring theme about Western leaders being less than capable at dealing with these multi-pronged crises. What's your take on that?
It's rather scathing, suggesting that leaders are not just negligent but outright manipulative. They use war or the threat of it as a tool. It's like a theatrical performance designed to shield them from accountability on home front issues.
True. That theatrical element is striking. But isn't it also a bit too conspiratorial? I mean, attributing war solely as a distraction might oversimplify complex geopolitical maneuvers.
Yeah, you're right in that it's a pretty contentious perspective. It almost reads like propaganda, but at the same time, it taps into a deep seated distrust of how political powers operate. There's a fine line here between insightful critique and, overreaching theory.
Agreed. And then there's the detail about potential IMF bailouts for not just France but even the UK. that suggests not only military concerns but deep rooted economic fragility in these nations.
Exactly. It's like a warning bell. If France and the UK end up in dire straits, the whole construct of the Western financial stability might crumble. It's almost like a domino effect. One bailout triggers another, and so on.
Yep, that's unsettling. What about the advice on how citizens might prepare for these tumultuous times? The content hints at protecting oneself, right?
Yeah, it does. There's this undercurrent that beyond just policy and politics, individuals need to be alert, whether it's preparing financially or even making strategic choices for personal safety. The speaker doesn't mince words.
And that, in itself, raises another issue: civic responsibility versus panic mongering. There's a fine line there, wouldn't you say?
Definitely. It's the classic dilemma. Should people truly gear up for an economic and political collapse? Or is it a manufactured crisis to distract and control the masses?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, while it's smart to be prepared, it's also important not to slide into a state of constant fear and reaction. There's a balance to be struck.
Right. And this discussion does seem to straddle that line. It's candid and provocative without giving definitive answers. It invites the listener to look at the cracks in the system and decide for themselves.
Exactly. Another thought provoking aspect is how these predictions mirror the fall of previous political and economic systems. Comparing current strategies to the collapse of communism injects historical perspective.
Yes, it's like they're saying history is cyclical. When systems become unsustainable, no matter the form, be it communism or our modern financial state, a collapse seems almost inevitable. It's like a warning that we're on a collision course.
Yeah, that's a stark comparison. But let's dig a bit deeper. Is this merely an alarmist projection, or is there substance behind predicting widespread failure from these economic practices?
It's a tough call. The argument hinges on the idea that our economic models are inherently flawed when they pivot on debt and speculative finance. So, if you believe that, then it might not be so far fetched.
I see your point. Still, I think there's a risk in overstating the narrative. Not every downturn leads to complete systemic collapse. Some reforms and adaptations might stabilize things.
True, that's a healthy critique. And it's important to note that while the conversation is steeped in high drama, real world politics usually involve more gradual shifts than these catastrophic flashpoints suggest.
Exactly. So, if we step back for a moment, the overarching theme here is one of warning. Warning that the West may be walking into an economic and military trap of its own making.
Precisely. And whether or not you buy into the idea that war is a deliberate distraction, the conversation encourages us to re examine the strategies of our global leaders and the sustainability of our financial systems.
Right, indeed. It's a complex interplay of power, finance, and conflict, always worth looking into more deeply.
For sure. And while these predictions might be polarizing, they offer a window into understanding how current events can be framed in a broader and sometimes darker narrative about the fate of the West.
Absolutely. Well, that was a rich conversation, dense with implications and loaded with provocative ideas. Thanks for walking through these points with me.
Thank you, and thanks to everyone listening. Stay curious and keep questioning the narratives around you, because sometimes the truth might just be waiting in the margins.